In Rome today, tourists walk through crowded streets, past enormous temples, ancient monuments, and the remains of an empire that once ruled much of the known world. But what most of them don't see is that another Rome exists beneath their feet. If you descend below the modern streets, the bright, familiar city slowly disappears, replaced by narrow corridors, carved stone walls, ancient inscriptions, burial niches, and chambers that have remained hidden for centuries. It can feel like entering a secret world. But archaeology tells us something even more interesting. These underground spaces were not one mysterious hidden city. Romans created them for many different reasons: to bury their dead, store water, extract stone, preserve goods, worship, and move through the city without disturbing the world above. So the real mystery isn't why Romans went underground. It's why, in an empire famous for building upward and outward, the earth beneath them became such a useful solution to the problems of life above it. At the height of the Roman Empire, Rome was a city under constant pressure. Streets were crowded with people, markets, workshops, temples, and apartment buildings, while goods and animals moved through narrow spaces from morning until night. Land inside the city was valuable, and every new building had to compete for it. Romans could expand outward, but that meant pushing farther from the center. They could also build upward, but ancient construction had limits. The ground beneath them offered another possibility, a whole new layer of usable space. But space was only part of the problem. Summers around the Mediterranean could be brutally hot, while underground environments could remain more stable. Water presented another challenge. Roman engineers built cisterns, wells, drainage channels, and aqueduct systems, many of which depended on carefully controlled spaces beneath the surface. Then there was stone. Romans dug into the earth to obtain building materials for the enormous city above. And once these spaces existed, they could be changed, expanded, and reused. What began as a quarry could become storage. A chamber could become a tomb. A practical excavation could take on an entirely new purpose. Archaeology reveals just how much happened beneath the streets, and it raises an even bigger question. What did Romans actually build down there? Now the mystery becomes easier to investigate, because beneath the Roman world, archaeologists have found physical evidence of what actually happened there. Around Rome, vast catacomb networks contain thousands of burial spaces arranged along narrow galleries and chambers. These were not simply secret escape tunnels, as popular stories sometimes suggest. They were organized funerary environments, marked by inscriptions, religious symbols, and carefully prepared places for the dead. But catacombs were only one part of the underground world. Roman hypogea could contain tombs and ceremonial spaces, while quarries provided the stone used to build the city above. Cisterns stored water, and underground channels helped control drainage and movement through crowded settlements. What makes these places especially fascinating is evidence of reuse. A space dug for one purpose could later be transformed for another. A quarry might become storage. A chamber could become a tomb. An existing water system could be expanded as the settlement grew. In other words, the Roman underground was never fixed. It changed as human needs changed. And that leaves us with a stranger question. Did Romans see the world beneath them as something separate, or simply as another part of the city? There was a practical reason the Romans kept returning to the earth. The underground environment could offer advantages that the surface could not. Depending on depth, construction, and local geology, spaces below ground can experience less dramatic temperature changes than the surface. In the Mediterranean heat, that could make underground areas useful for storage, water management, and shelter. But the Romans were not simply looking for somewhere cool. Humans have always modified their surroundings to reduce physical stress and make survival easier, and Roman engineering pushed that instinct much further. By understanding water, stone, drainage, and the ground itself, they could create environments that protected valuable resources and supported crowded urban life. There was also a psychological contradiction. Darkness and confinement can make underground spaces feel threatening. Yet the same separation can create a sense of protection and control. We still live with that contradiction today. Modern cities place subways, parking garages, tunnels, storage facilities, and critical infrastructure beneath the surface. even as technology gives us more ways to dominate our environment. The Romans were not escaping nature. They were learning how to make nature work for them. But underground spaces could serve a purpose far more personal than engineering. They could become places connected to death, memory, and belief. The obvious explanation is that Romans went underground because it was useful. But archaeology complicates that story. Some subterranean spaces were connected not to survival, but to death, memory, religion, and ritual. Roman funerary spaces placed the dead beneath the landscape, while keeping their identities alive through inscriptions, symbols, and carefully designed monuments. In the catacombs, underground corridors became places where communities could remember people who had disappeared from the world above. Their separation from ordinary city life may have given these spaces a deeper, symbolic meaning. Yet there is another important misconception to clear away. Archaeological evidence does not support the idea that enormous Roman populations secretly lived beneath cities in vast hidden civilizations. Instead, researchers find specialized underground environments serving different purposes. A burial chamber was not the same thing as a cistern. A quarry was not a sanctuary. A drainage tunnel was not a cellar. Modern observers place all of these spaces into one category simply because they are underground. The Romans likely experienced them very differently, and that reveals something about us too. Why does the human imagination so easily turn the darkness beneath our feet into a world of secrecy, danger, and hidden knowledge? The answer may reach far beyond Rome. Look around a modern city, and the Roman solution suddenly feels familiar. We send trains beneath streets because the surface is crowded. We build parking garages below buildings, store water underground, carve tunnels through mountains, and hide electrical and communication systems beneath our feet. Why? Because modern cities face the same basic problem Rome faced. Too many human needs competing for limited surface space. Climate matters too. Underground and partially buried spaces can provide useful temperature stability, making them valuable for storage, infrastructure, and energy management. The technology has changed dramatically, but the human logic has not. Romans relied on stone, gravity, arches, and hydraulic engineering. We rely on concrete, steel, sensors, pumps, and computers. Yet both civilizations manipulate the same physical environment to make dense urban life possible. And that is where the Roman underground becomes surprisingly personal. You may think of the world beneath a city as something artificial or modern, but humans have been using the earth this way for thousands of years. The underground is not an alien environment. It is one of humanity's oldest tools for making civilization work. And if that pattern continues, perhaps cities were always destined to grow downward. The Roman underground reveals something much larger than Roman engineering. Civilization creates complexity. As populations grow, people need more water, food storage, transportation, sanitation, burial spaces, religious places, and infrastructure. Eventually, the surface becomes crowded with competing demands. The solution is not always to spread outward. Sometimes, humans create layers. Roman cities were already becoming three-dimensional systems, with streets above drains, buildings above foundations and cellars, and water moving through hidden channels. Tombs and catacombs occupied the spaces below. Modern cities have simply pushed this idea much further. Subways move beneath streets. Utility networks run below sidewalks. Foundations reach deep into the ground, and entire transportation systems operate underground. Technology did not erase this ancient human instinct to use the environment around us. It expanded it. The Romans were not necessarily going underground because they had failed to master the surface. In many cases, they were doing it because their cities had become successful enough to demand more space than the surface could provide. And once you see civilization this way, the ground beneath your feet stops looking empty. It starts looking like another layer of the human world. Return to Rome today, where tourists move through streets surrounded by traffic and ancient monuments. Above them is the Rome tourists know, but beneath those streets are walls, graves, drains, chambers, water systems, excavated stone, and forgotten lives. The Romans did not build one hidden civilization. They made the earth part of civilization, That is why the underground fascinates us. It represents infrastructure beneath comfort, remains beneath monuments, and forgotten lives beneath cities. Maybe the most Roman thing about our world is what we build beneath the ground. Perhaps that is what we never truly outgrew. The next time you walk through a city, remember, you may not be walking on history. You may be walking on top of it.